Hi, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up, Governor Kathy Hochul signed legislation that will put an end to the puppy mill pipeline. As animal rights advocates celebrate this victory, they are continuing to protect guinea pigs from being sold in pet stores. The president of Voters for Animal Rights joins me to discuss this effort. Why is there a fight to protect guinea pigs? Then, as common respiratory viruses surge in children and adults across the city, medical experts are warning New Yorkers about a tripledemic. The chief medical officer of MJHS Centers for Rehabilitation and Nursing Care joined me to discuss what you should expect in the wake of a tridemic and how to stay healthy. What respiratory illnesses are included in the tridemic? After that, WNBA star Brittany Griner is free after nearly 10 months of detainment in Russia. Her freedom was traded in exchange for prisoner and Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout. A professor of political science for Rice University joins me to discuss all you need to know about prisoner swaps. How do prisoner swaps work? And finally, paying homage to her parents and their marriage, first-time director Jeanne Farmer joins us to discuss her short film, HoneyLove. The film highlights 37 years of marriage and what happens when your life partner falls sick. What are some themes the director will explore with HoneyLove? So stay tuned, all this and much more is headed your way because we're now officially open. Hello, everyone. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and I want to wish you all a very happy new year. Today is Tuesday, January 3rd, and you are now watching Open, a live program bringing the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. Governor Kathy Hochul signed legislation banning the sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits at retail pet shops. This comes as a solution to end the puppy mill pipeline and to stop abusive pet breeders. Animal rights advocates are now calling on New York City leaders to ban the sale of guinea pigs in pet stores. Joining me to discuss is President of Voters for Animal Rights, Allie Taylor. Allie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, for those who are unaware, can you brief us on what puppy mills are and talk a little bit about the fight to get these sites closed down?
A puppy mill is a mass breeding facility where mother dogs are bred over and over and over until they're no longer deemed useful and then they are killed. Puppies that are bred in puppy mills are living in awful conditions. They do not get any kind of appropriate health care, and then they are trucked across state for hours at a time to pet stores where they're sold to unsuspecting customers who are looking to bring a new family member into their home. People are often tricked and manipulated into buying these pets, thinking that they're happy and that they're healthy, but not knowing that they actually may be injured or have diseases that are fatal, and that both they and the parent dogs were raised in absolutely horrendous conditions.
Now, we talked about this the last time that you were on the show, and you were very passionate about it. I learned so much about that. How does it feel to just have this victory?
This feels terrific. New York is now the sixth state in the country to ban the sale of dogs and cats and rabbits in pet stores. And we hope that more states will soon take the lead and make cruel breeding facilities a dark relic of the past. We are grateful to Governor Hochul for her leadership on this issue, and we're really excited to see what we can get done in 2023.
Now, what are some rules or guidelines these pet shops must now follow?
There's not much that they need to follow at the moment, which is why these pet stores need to stop selling dogs, cats, and rabbits, period. There are some rules that are set forth by the USDA and by state laws, but they're barely followed. There's little to no enforcement at all. And we certainly cannot trust these for-profit entities to follow any rules, which is why it's absolutely a terrific victory for the animals. They're no longer going to be able to sell them. What this law does is it says that by the end of 2024, all pet stores across New York State will no longer be able to sell dogs, cats, and rabbits, period. They will, however, be able to rent out space within their facilities to allow local rescues and shelters to have some animals on display for ad hoc events.
Now, your organization is also advocating for the removal of guinea pigs known as Intro 4 in pet shops. Can you expand on this?
Sure. So during the pandemic, many people who are working from home for the first time, who were unable to socialize and had a lot more time on their hands, decided that they wanted to bring an animal into their life, which is very noble and something that we always encourage adoption. However, a lot of folks didn't know any better, and so they started going to pet stores and buying guinea pigs, and they started buying quite a lot of them. Guinea pigs are not like cats and dogs. They're not as affectionate. They're not going to snuggle up with you in bed every night. And what we found is that by the middle of the pandemic, there was a massive uptick in the number of guinea pigs that were not only being surrendered to New York City Animal Care Centers, which is the city's animal shelter system, but we also started getting lots of stories about people abandoning guinea pigs in city parks. These are not wild animals. They are domesticated animals. They cannot survive on their own. So when you dump a guinea pig or any domestic animal in a park, you're setting them up, unfortunately, to die. They will starve to death or they'll be eaten by predators. But the main crux of the problem is that Animal Care Centers of New York City is an organization that already is taking in 20 to 30,000 animals of every species per year. They are underfunded. Their staff is constantly working overtime. And by having this explosion of guinea pigs, it's putting a huge burden and a huge strain on an already overburdened animal shelter system. So what this legislation would do is it would prohibit New York City pet stores from selling guinea pigs at all. And rest assured, if you'd still like to have a guinea pig, you can do that, but you would need to go to a shelter or a rescue to adopt.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because also the same with the dogs and the cats. If people, prior, they probably would go to a pet store. Can you just let everybody know if they would love to have, an extra family member, what they can do?
The best thing to do is to go to nycacc.org, and you can check out all of the thousands of animals that are currently up and available for adoption. And then I would recommend making an appointment to go in person. They have facilities in Brooklyn, Staten Island, and Manhattan. You can meet with adoption counselors, and you can meet with the animals and decide who you'd like to bring home.
Now, you recently had a council hearing on December 14th at City Hall. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Last week, we had a very successful hearing in the New York City Council. This was the legislation Intro 4 was heard in the New York City Committee on Health, which is led by Chairwoman Lynn Shulman. And also present was Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala, who's also the prime sponsor of the bill. And we heard from dozens of advocates who are in support of the legislation. We actually had one person show up who was in opposition, and no shock, they were from the pet store industry. But we heard perspectives from rescuers, from animal shelters, from animal rights activists, and from veterinarians and other public policy experts about why this bill should pass swiftly. And we're very grateful to Speaker Adrienne Adams for allowing this hearing to move forward. We're also very grateful to Deputy Speaker Ayala and to Chairperson Lynn Shulman, who has notified us that she will be moving forward with advancing the bill.
Now, how does it feel to have so many people be supportive of this? Because I think that, although people think they're doing right by animals, a lot of people aren't educated on, the proper ways, or, people probably think pet stores are, a safe place for animals. So to see so many people, come out and support this, how does that feel?
It feels like we're making progress. I remember when we first started working on animal legislation in the city council 10 years ago, it was controversial whether or not to require pet stores to have fire sprinklers in their facilities. Today, that would be an absolute no-brainer. So to see the city council and the state legislature starting to make this big progress in passing really substantial laws for animals, I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming up in 2023.
Now, recently on September 28th, roughly 20 guinea pigs were abandoned in the lobby of a Staten Island building and were rescued by New York City Animal Care Centers, who are now overloaded with abandoned guinea pigs. You briefly talked about it, but could you just talk about it a little bit more about, why we saw something like that?
We never know exactly why somebody would abandon a pet, and we try not to judge. We try to just work on solutions. Sometimes it can be that they don't have access to stable and safe housing, and so while they're trying to protect the human members of their household, I think sometimes folks get desperate and they panic and they don't know that the safest thing to do would be to bring their animals to an animal shelter. Sometimes people lose their jobs and they're unable to continue to pay for vet care or for food. I think it's important to let folks know that there absolutely are resources out there. ACC has a pet food bank. There's other organizations out there who can provide grants for veterinary care. But really, I do think that the city council and the state legislature does need to start taking a look at really ramping up and providing even more resources to make sure that pet parents have all the support they need.
Now, people often release these animals when they feel overwhelmed or they underestimate how much care they actually need. Is this a common issue in places like New York City or even across the country?
This, unfortunately, is a common problem in New York City and across the country. And while we have seen numerous programs that have popped up in New York City and New York State and across the country to prevent surrender of dogs and cats, I think that what happens is when folks buy animals from pet stores, those pet stores are not exactly screening people. Their goal is to just move what they consider merchandise, the animals themselves, out of their stores as quickly as possible. So they're not educating people on on the proper care and the amount of time and resources that it takes to care for these animals. They're not exactly asking the right questions to make sure that it's the type of animal that should be in their home. And so the animals end up paying the ultimate price when people bring them home and realize that they may not be exactly what they thought they were getting into.
Now, what kind of care do guinea pigs or, smaller rodents that are similar, what kind of care do they require?
So I'm not a veterinarian, so I can't speak to exactly the type of care that different types of small animals require. But what I do know is that guinea pigs, you cannot just leave them in a cage to sit all day. They do require daily attention from human beings. They require a special type of food, and they do require very expensive vet care when they get sick or when they need to be spayed or neutered.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned that because I know previously from myself, I looked up stuff about rabbits and I learned that, a lot of people similar to guinea pigs just think that they belong in cages and, they really need a lot of space to jump and move around. So, what would you do to encourage somebody who may be interested but aren't sure where to start? What would you do to encourage them just to get educated about these smaller animals?
I would encourage them to go on the internet and to look at the websites of the many rabbit and small animal rescues that exist in New York City and New York State. They all have terrific information about how to prepare your home for having a rabbit and what type of time and financial commitment it takes. These are also organizations that they will not even allow folks to adopt a rabbit or guinea pig or another small animal until they feel confident that the homes that they're going to will be able to provide the right kind of care.
All right, Allie, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
To stay connected with Voters for Animal Rights, please go to their website at www.vafr.org or follow them on Instagram at Voters for Animal Rights and Twitter at The Animal Lovers. Don't go away. We'll be right back with more Open right after this.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut, the one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink. Or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking. Now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed. Better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead. Catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Kids!
I don't want to talk about it.
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 Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency.
Kids, you all right?
This family's prepared. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan. Go to nyc.gov/readyny or call 311 for more information.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad.
Thanks for hearing me out, bro.
Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay?
I know what you're thinking. I need a job.
Well, I've been there.
I've been there.
But you gotta keep going.
You just need the right skills. Find an apprenticeship.
I found a course online.
You can do this.
You will find
You
something.
will find something new.
Welcome back. New Yorkers are faced with the threat of what many health professionals are calling a tripledemic as we continue to brace the winter season. With viruses like the cold and flu affecting the health of New Yorkers, Chief Medical Officer of MJHS Centers for Rehabilitation and Nursing Care, Dr. Mohammed Butt, joins me now to discuss what you can do to stay healthy this winter. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure to have you here. I greatly appreciate your invitation, and I am honored to be with you on this program today.
Thank you so much. So I want to jump right into it. We've been hearing a lot about the term tripledemic. For those who are unaware, what is the tripledemic and what illnesses are included in it?
So the terminology tripledemic is currently being used for 3 respiratory viral infections. The first one being the COVID-19, we all know. And the second infection is the influenza, commonly known as flu. And the third infection is caused by RSV.
Now, many of us are familiar with COVID, of course, and the flu, but what is RSV?
RSV stands for respiratory syncytial virus. Respiratory syncytial virus is one of the respiratory viruses which causes respiratory infection. It can present as stuffy or runny nose, fever, chills, cough, phlegm, headache, generalized weakness, body aches, and many more.
Now, I'm curious to know, does a common cold fall into this category, of winter illnesses or respiratory viruses?
Absolutely. The common cold is a common terminology used for all these respiratory tract infections caused by virus.
Now, I definitely want to touch on this because I think a lot of people will use the weather as, a reason why they may have gotten sick. So maybe they'll say, I went outside without a hat. Can you clarify how much does cold weather actually, affect or play a part in how you contract any of these viruses?
So in the common cold weather, we stay at home and we have most of the activities indoor. So when we are having those indoor activities, we tend to meet our friends and families as indoor. And if one person is sick, the infection is transmitted by contact or droplet to the others, our loved ones.
Okay, so to clarify, it's not because, it was 20 degrees outside while you're cold. Well, you have a cold. Okay, got it. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Right. Now, as a health professional, do you have any concerns as we approach this time?
Yes. A lot of people are tired of having face masks on, and we are not properly washing our hands. So the practice of face covering, hand washing, keeping the social distance is very important in a current time that we are going through.
Now, I'm so glad that you kind of mentioned that because I do feel like the pandemic has changed, or maybe it temporarily changed how we, approach viruses and, just dealt with being sick. What should people continue to do to ensure that they're not contagious?
So if you're sick, stay home, quarantine yourself, get yourself tested. It is very important to get yourself tested. Currently, we have home testing kits for COVID. And for RSV and for influenza, we should contact our healthcare agents, get ourselves tested at the urgent care centers, at our medical offices, and consult your practitioner to stay healthy.
Now, what are the different symptoms for RSV, COVID, and the flu? I know it's a lot for people to kind of keep up with and to kind of differentiate them, but can you talk about that and how can people know the difference?
So the symptoms, all the symptoms for all these three and the other respiratory viruses are awful. They are similar. It is difficult to differentiate based on the symptoms. What disease are we coming across? But again, cough, phlegm, fever, chills, runny or stuffy nose, body aches, headache, vomiting, diarrhea, are all these symptoms of these current infections that we are currently having.
Now, I know you kind of mentioned that, people should stay home. I know during the pandemic, people would stay home for about 14 days. Is that still necessary? Do we still have to stay home for that long period of time? I know a lot of people probably don't want to miss work or school while they're sick, but is it something you still recommend? And what length of time should they stay home to recover?
So the recommendations have changed from the beginning of the COVID to now. So the practitioners are following the recommendations by the New York State Department of Health and the recommendations from the CDC. So we should absolutely follow those quarantine regulations. There are criteria to return to your work. And the practitioners are very well aware they should absolutely follow those recommendations.
And can you quickly just brief us on what those recommendations are?
So you have to be fever-free for at least 24 hours prior to discontinuing your quarantine. Your symptoms should be improving. And the quarantine period, the length ranges from 5 days to 10 days currently. So these criteria have to be met before you return to your work.
Now, what are some precautions older individuals or people with compromised immune systems can take to protect themselves during this time?
Beside the core principles of infectious control prevention that we mentioned earlier, the face covering, the hand washing, and the social distancing, they should get their COVID vaccine and their boosters thereafter, as well as the flu shot. If they are immunocompromised, or if they are 65 years and older, they should get their pneumonia vaccine as well.
Now, I know this same exact time last year, the topic of vaccines was still quite controversial. At this point, many New Yorkers are vaccinated, but do they have to get vaccinated again to ensure that they're healthy?
Absolutely. They should get their booster doses. It is a good time to get their booster doses now to keep themselves and their loved ones healthy.
And I know there's also a flu vaccine. Should people get both? Or, which vaccines should they get to stay healthy?
So the flu shot, we have been having a practice of getting our flu shot every year. So we should be getting our annual flu shot. And it is recommended to receive both the shots together. So you can absolutely get your both shots together if you are concerned about multiple visits to your provider.
Now, I really want to talk about children. We talked about older adults and people with, compromised immune systems. But how do we protect children during this time? I know, especially for the little ones, it is a little bit harder for them to understand, certain precautions. So what would you recommend a parent do?
So they should practice the face masking. They should have hand hygiene practice properly done. the hand washing and the use of the sanitizers, social distancing, and keeping ourselves away if we are sick, testing ourselves promptly, and again, staying away if we are sick. Keep the babies, the grandparents, and the immunocompromised away from you.
Now, many people have abandoned the use of masks this year because it isn't required for many locations throughout the city. Could you talk about how difficult that may make things a little bit for, people who work in the healthcare system? And what are your thoughts on that?
So I would definitely recommend face masking, especially when you are having an indoor activities. You may be in a period of getting in an infection. You may not present some symptoms, but you may have acquired the illness, and you ultimately may transmit that to your loved ones. So keep the mask on. Continue the hand washing. Proper hand washing is very important. Just a hand washing is not. Proper hand washing is absolutely recommended. And keep some social distances. We have learned through this pandemic that these three important measures can keep us healthy and away from those respiratory viral infections.
Now, I know the idea of a tripledemic can sound, pretty intimidating and very scary to those who, are probably still dealing with the effects of COVID. One, should we worry about another surge? And two, how long do you think this will last?
So we have seen after the Halloween and after the Thanksgiving, there was a surge in cases. And here we are after the wonderful winter holidays and the New Year celebration. And we expect to have some higher number of cases after these holiday season.
All right, Doctor, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to explain this to us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me with you today.
Of course. To learn more about the MJHS, please go to their website at www.mjhs.org or follow them across all platforms at MJHS01. We'll be right back with more Open right after this.
You can now watch MNN, Brick TV, QPTV, and SIC TV on BronxNet. Tune into BX Omni, Channel 67 Optimum, 2133 Files during most Sunday evenings. We'll show you some amazing content from our friends at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, Brick TV in Brooklyn, Queens Public Television, and Staten Island Community Television. Every borough represented in the Boogie Down. Epic partnerships for the ages. And catch our new Next channel, produced in partnership with MNN, 24/7 on BronxNet Channel 952 Optimum and 2138 Fios.
So much. Fostering a pet for a friend or neighbor can keep families together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Jason, let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner!
Go. Excellent. Yeah, I saw you guys out there.
Welcome back. After nearly 10 months of detainment in Russia, Brittany Griner walks free in the U.S. due to a prisoner swap. In exchange for Griner, Russian arms dealer Victor Butt was freed, leaving many people with questions and concerns. Richard Stoll, professor of political science at Rice University, joins me to discuss. Richard, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
Now, for those who are unaware, can you quickly talk about Brittany Griner's detainment in Russia?
Sure. In February, she was going to be flying out of Russia, and she went through the things we all go through when we get on planes. They look through your luggage and the things you're carrying on, and they found less than a gram of medically prescribed hash oil in her luggage. That is illegal in Russia, and she was arrested for that. She'd been playing in the Russian Premier Basketball League. And she went to trial beginning on July 1st. She pleaded guilty. And on August 4th, she was sentenced to 9 years in prison. And in November, she was transferred to a Russian penal colony.
Now, as I mentioned, she is now free in the U.S. due to a prisoner swap. Can you first talk about what that is and how do they work?
Well, it's basically when two parties, and I say that because in this case, it's two different countries going back and forth between the governments. But there have been cases where on the one side, you have a government trying to free its citizens. And on the other side, it's a non-government group, like, say, a terrorist group. But basically, they have to start communicating with each other. And that might begin publicly, like the U.S. government says, gosh, we really wish that so-and-so would get released. Then there's usually some kind of a private discussion, and they come to an agreement about what the swap will consist of, who's going to be swapped, something about the conditions under which they'll be swapped.
Now, I want to touch on something that you mentioned. You said that it doesn't always have to be between like two opposing countries. It could be like domesticated or domestic. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. We can think of instances where Americans and other foreign nationals have been, I'll say, captured by, say, terrorist groups. And the U.S. government can decide to negotiate with a terrorist group to get Americans released. Of course, the group has to agree to negotiate it. But yeah, people can be held by groups other than governments.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. Now, what does the relationship, if it is between two countries, what does that relationship have to look like in order to do a swap? So is it always like the U.S. and Russia who have a long, relationship with each other? Does it always have to look like that?
No. First of all, right now there are almost 1,100 Canadians in various prisons in the United States for various crimes. I don't anticipate that the U.S. and the Canadians governments will be negotiating some kind of a swap. It's kind of like, well, they broke America's laws. There was a legitimate legal procedure. They're not going to be mistreated in American prisons, so they'll just have to serve their time. So, it can be a case, though, where if the relationship is extremely good, like between the U.S. and Canada, there's probably going to be no swap involved. If the relationship is extremely bad, there's probably also not going to be a swap because the two groups aren't even talking. It's kind of in the middle zone. So we do have relations with Russia. We have a serious disagreement, for example, with what's happening in Ukraine, but we still have relations. So that's more typical of when swaps are likely to occur.
Oh, okay. Now, how did the U.S. decide who they were going to swap for Griner?
Well, first of all, let me be clear. I don't have any inside information on this, okay? But just in general, as the two sides talk back and forth, it may be, in this case, it was clear the U.S. wanted Griner. The Russians may have suggested more than one person, but they make their preferences known. The U.S. government has to think, is this okay with us? Do we think this is a reasonable swap? And things may go back and forth until there's an agreement on both sides about what the swap will consist of. We don't know right now whether there was a lot of back and forth about that, or whether the Russians from the very beginning insisted on this particular swap.
Now, I know a lot of online users voice concerns about the freeing of a Russian arms dealer. Just from your opinion, do you think people should be worried at all?
I don't think it's unfair to be worried about it. But the question is, if we went back and forth with the Russians repeatedly and they said, this is the only person that we will agree to swap Griner for, the U.S. government could say no. Would we be happier if we still had this Russian who did very bad things, but Griner was still in prison? I mean, is that worth it? That's something everybody has to answer for themselves. I don't have a general answer for that.
Now, I want to touch on this. What are the circumstances that would result in a prison swap?
Again, ultimately, both sides have to agree that they have more to be gained from the swap than not swapping. And the two sides can have very different preferences, very different senses of what's important and what's not important. But ultimately, they both have to agree we are better off by doing this swap than by not doing it.
Now, I know in this country, a lot of people are always vocal about how they feel about things. And for this particular situation, a lot of people are saying that this wasn't really the best idea. One, is this a political, opinion? Is it something that is very political? And why do you think people are saying that this isn't the best idea?
Well, I think there's probably several different reasons, but, and the two that come to mind are, number one, this American was unjustly imprisoned, but the person we are giving up to get her back did really, really bad things, and that's not a good thing to do. So from the point of view of at least some Americans, I'm sure they see this as an unfair swap. The other thing to be concerned about is, does the fact that we made a deal now encourage various groups and various countries to seize other Americans just to get the deal they want? Does it? And that would be a bad thing.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about Victor. I know people online are giving him this nickname, the Merchant of Death. Do you by any chance know how he got that name? And is that also possibly why people are a little bit afraid about his freedom?
As far as I know, he was a major dealer in arms. And yes, he is a truly bad person. I think most Americans would agree that Griner was innocent, or, the worst thing you can say is, even though she had a legal right in the U.S. to have that container, she and her people should have known that it was likely to cause problems in Russia. That's the worst you can say about her. He is a truly bad person. But the question is, again, if the Russians say this is the only way you're getting Griner back, are you willing to let her stay in a terrible prison for a number of years because you don't want to give him up? I think that's a question that every one of us needs to ask themselves, and different people can come to different conclusions.
I also really like that you brought up, that what she did was legal in the U.S. and just overseas that it wasn't considered legal. And I think that is something that a lot of people should think about when they are traveling to places across the world. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I want to move on to someone named Paul Whelan. Who is this? And can you explain why people are now bringing him up?
Yes. He was arrested in December of 2018. He's a former Marine, as we can see from the picture that you're showing. And he was accused of being a spy and got a 16-year prison sentence. He apparently, according to his brother, and when I say that, it's not like I don't believe his brother, but that's the source of the information. He went to Moscow to attend the wedding of a former fellow Marine, and he was also supposed to be helping out the guests because they'd never been to Russia before he had been there, and he was arrested and charged with being a spy and convicted and put into prison. I don't know of anyone that believes he was actually a spy. People believe that he was unjustly convicted. And if nothing happens, he's going to be in prison there for a long period of time. So, yes, it would be wonderful if he was released as well. But it appears to be the case that in terms of the Griner swap, that it does appear to be the case. The U.S. government said we would like him as well, but the Russians said no, they didn't want to give him up. And so again, we come back to, from the point of view of the U.S. government, okay, if we can't get both of them back, do we accept what we can get, Griner, or do we walk away and say, unless you're willing to give us both these people back, there is no deal?
Right. Now, Griner was also a WNBA star. I'm curious to know, do you think at all this contributed to her finally receiving her freedom?
It might have had something to do with that, but if we step back and look on the larger scale, we see Americans, quote unquote, ordinary Americans, who also get released. In October, 7 Americans who had been imprisoned in Venezuela were released in return for 2 Venezuelans that the U.S. government had imprisoned, for example. That didn't make the news, or at least it wasn't a major story, because these were ordinary Americans. So that's not a diss against Griner, but someone who is a major figure is more likely to get a major news story. But yes, quote unquote, ordinary Americans have also been released, and the U.S. government works to do that. The person in the U.S. government who is in charge of trying to sort of deal with this says that in the last 8 or 9 months, 15 Americans have been released from various foreign countries.
All right. Well, Richard, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this. I definitely learned a lot, so I truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with more Open right after this.
Man, it's lonely. Like, going through life lonely.
There is the therapeutic aspect of music, just expressing how you feel. I'm going to talk to Howie about his feelings, make it into a song.
STEM is everywhere, like here. Behind the scenes of The Walking Dead.
When we break down clothes, we tumble it with trisodium phosphate, rock salt, and dish detergent.
We stitched together images of our model and created a 3D set that can be walked through in a VR headset.
We're able to turn 12 walkers into 1,000 walker hordes.
STEM can create new worlds on and off the screen. What will you make with STEM? Get inspired at shecanstem.com.
You're not gonna get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff.
Mama!
Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
COVID-19 has changed how we spend weekends with the girls. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to brunching instead of late-night munching. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts. As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it? Is it safe? Should I wait?
It's okay to have questions. Now get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Dear moms and dads, what you have achieved here today is going to help us and our futures. It is why we are coming up on stage to collect your diplomas.
You know it's true.
Mom, we love you always.
Everything I do.
When you graduate, they graduate. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you.
Welcome back. One actress is getting behind the camera for her directorial debut as she pays homage to her parents. HoneyLove is a short film that follows Ada Tillman as she reflects on her 37 years of marriage with her husband and the moment that all changed. Let's take a look at this trailer for HoneyLove.
You were dreaming about Daddy? Yeah.
Joining me now to discuss the film is Jeanne Farmer. Jeanne, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Kibin. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Had my coffee this morning.
So I want to talk about the film HoneyLove, but before we talk about that, I actually want to talk and learn a little bit more about you. Can you talk about your passion for the arts and what actually led you on this journey to New York City to pursue that?
Yeah. So honestly, I started in the early 2000s, but my passion started when I was around 4 years old when I first saw Keisha Knight Pulliam on The Cosby Show. And in my childlike brain, I thought, I want to be where she is. I want to do what she's doing. I want to live in that house, not really knowing that it wasn't real. And the older I got, the more I was just interested in how can I perform? How can I get on a stage? How can I make my voice be heard? It took some time, but finally around 2006, I decided that I was going to pursue acting, and I've just been on the journey ever since.
Now, according to your bio, you previously served in the military, and I definitely want to say thank you for your service. But, what was that transition like, from being in the military to doing something that was within the arts?
Yeah. So I actually went to undergrad first. I went to Middle Tennessee State University. I was studying radio, television, broadcasting. And I decided to join the military during my sophomore year, the second semester of my sophomore year. I joined the Army Reserves before 9/11. 9/11 happened. My military unit was deployed in 2003 to Kuwait, and we were there for a year. And so one of the things about leaving home, leaving what you know, and then going to a new place, I think what I was going through while I was in Kuwait was this thought that things would be on hold back home. Like when I came back, I would be able to start all over again, or I would be able to start at the point that I had left. And, I had changed. There were a lot of things that I wasn't as interested in, probably because I had gone to war. I wasn't interested in going to the football games all the time. I was more interested in finishing my college journey, getting my degree, moving on to doing the things that I wanted to do, because I had that break. And when I came back, I was like, I really just want to do all the things that I possibly can to fulfill my dreams.
Now, you've done some work as an actress, which I think is super amazing. What inspired you to actually get behind the camera with directing and producing?
Yeah, some years ago, I also lived in Los Angeles for a while. And some years ago, I was at a church service, and I remember the pastor saying, God has blessed you with more than one gift. God has blessed you with more than one talent. And I thought, I can be versatile in this medium. you know? I don't have to just act. And I always have stories. Sometimes I have stories in my mind that play out like a movie, like pictures. And so I thought if I'm going to tell stories, I want to be able to tell them from different perspectives. So let me see if I can figure out this writing thing and figure out how I can direct. And so I kind of just pushed myself, especially during the pandemic, to be like, okay, I have these thoughts, I have these ideas. Let me go ahead and make those things come to fruition.
Now, one of the stories that you brought to life was, of course, HoneyLove. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so HoneyLove is very loosely based off my parents. My dad passed away in 2009. He had lung cancer. And even after that time, 2009, how many years is that? I'm really bad at math. But to this day, my mom still talks to my dad. She wishes him a happy birthday, happy anniversary. She dreams about him. And I thought, how can I tell their story in a way that pays homage to them? Because my parents were together for over 30 something years. My mom was working a full-time job taking care of my dad when he was sick. And I feel like that portion, their life, their journey, and her taking care of them was a great story to tell. So I figured, why not start with my parents first, as far as like storytelling is concerned and directing.
Now, I want to know, why did their love inspire you to tell this story? And, when did you realize this was a story that you wanted to tell?
Yeah, so yesterday I was in this meeting, and there was a quote that was said that said, it's by Dr. Brene Brown, and it says, talk to yourself the way that you talk to someone you love. And I thought about it, and I thought, sometimes I think people are under the impression that love is just like this cozy thing, that it's all like happy, positive vibes. But love is also telling people the truth, even when it hurts. My parents had been together for quite a long time. I had seen them in their ups and downs, when they were happy with each other, when they had an argument, when an argument led to them laughing. I had seen my parents compromise and make a way out of no way. And so I thought, how can I tell this story of love? I think often whenever we see stories about Black people, about Black families, it is often connected to some tragedy, some violence. And we are more than that. We are more than just that idea of what the African diaspora is. And so I wanted to tell this story of love and continuing forward.
Now, I love that you brought that up. Would you say those are maybe some of the themes that this short film explores? And, if not, what are some of the themes that your film explores?
Yeah, most definitely. So I can say love because I keep saying that, but definitely compromise. Being in a relationship, there is some give and take. Also, grief. How does a person deal with grief? I think one of the ways my mom has done it is by talking to my dad, is by holding on to him. And then moving forward. How do you move forward when your partner, when your helpmate is no longer there? You still have that grief, but you still know that there is more that you have to do in this life. My mom tells me often, she says, the Lord told me he's not done with me yet. And so I think about how, in this film, I want to tell more than just one idea of what love is. It encompasses a number of things.
Now, HoneyLove was officially selected to participate in the Emerging Artists Film Festival. Can you talk a little bit more about that journey?
Yeah, so after we finished the film, let me just say, let me breathe a bit, because doing a short film is not an easy feat, even if it is like 15 minutes. It takes a whole group of people to come on board. And after I finished the film, after the team finished the film, we decided to submit it to film festivals. Emerging Artists Film Festival was the first festival to say, yes, we want HoneyLove. And it was really exciting. In this festival, what you do is you let people know that the film has been selected. They go and watch. They vote on whether or not they like your film, and then from those votes, you can get awards or get selected for awards.
Now that the filming, is over, and as you mentioned, you took that deep breath and you had time to reflect, what is something that you would say you learned about yourself in this process?
Yeah. When we were in the midst of shooting the film, Kibin, I was so tired. I was that kind of tired that I was when I was in boot camp, waking up at 3 a.m. going on road marches and falling asleep in the mud. I was tired, but I also and it's like that delirious tired. I don't know if you've ever felt like that, but I told myself, this has to be completed. This is a story worth telling, not just for myself, but for other people. Even if people who watch this don't look like me, people have experienced this. All types of people have experienced some type of loss, whether it be a husband, a child, a friend. And so I just knew, like, regardless of how tired I was going to keep going. And I just have that, I don't know, that tenacity. I'm not going to stop. I will not stop.
Now, that's so amazing. Can you quickly just let everybody know what they can do to further support this film? We obviously, wanted to do well and expand. So what can people do to support?
Yeah, so we have a couple of other festivals that I have submitted to. I haven't heard anything back, but anytime you see me post HoneyLove on Instagram, please like it. Please go to the link. I think I've given a number of people links to like the movie, watch the movie. So if people can continue to help out in terms of, or support in terms of, whenever you see me post, you go watch. That would be like a great way of telling the team that this was something that was just worthwhile, this experience.
Well, Jeanne, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this beautiful story.
Thank you so much, Kibin.
To keep in touch with Jeanne Farmer and all of her work, please go to her website at www.jeannefarmer.com or follow her on Instagram at Jeanne Farmer. We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and for you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the Recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. Wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.